Asteroid of fear.
What's up, everyone? I've never done this, but thought I would start today's episode with a little prequel, a little explanation of um how do I say this? This interview, it starts off and ends kind of normal, but the middle feels like I was in a trance, if you will. It gets a little complicated. Some of it gets hard to understand, some of the words, if you will. So bear with me, bear with it. I tried to keep it on track as best I could, but yeah, it should be interesting nonetheless. So hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I have with me Dean Graves, and we're going to talk about probably some meditation, healing from stress, and quite a few different things. It should be a very well-rounded conversation, and hopefully you get some value out of it. How are you doing today, Dean?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to be here.
Yes, always excited to learn a little bit, to learn something new, or just get a different perspective. And um, I also enjoy kind of learning about history, kind of why some people make the choices that they do and where it leads them, but to also kind of look at what was going on in the world at that time. And because I think that always influences decisions a little bit. And, you know, I'm 48 and I'm sure you're a little older than me. And so you also get a different perspective in that way.
Yes,
I had an interview
sure.
with somebody who was 82 and you're able to see the world or listen to how the world was, how completely different it was and how it influenced her choices as to the life that she led.
Hmm.
But on that note, give us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up and kind of what was childhood like and what did you aspire to be growing up and what where did that change and how did we end up here in front of each other? Because I think you took a total departure.
Okay. Well, this is a windy road that we're about to go on.
My favorite kind.
I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I was raised by a single mom. I graduated high school. My undergraduate studies began with a focus on the sciences, with the anticipation of being a physician. And once I got into collegiate studies, I realized that I really liked chemistry, but I didn't like biology at all. And so it's really tough to be a physician if you don't like biology.
Correct.
So it took me over to the other side of the campus, and I finished a degree and some graduate work in humanities, principally psychology and philosophy in English, which I used English every day. So it was a worthwhile venture.
Endeavor.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um, Left school, went a business route. I worked for a bank for a few years and determined that banking was not where my interest lied, and went into the real estate business as a commercial broker initially, and then commercial developer. And I did that for, I don't know, I guess 25, 30 years or so, and moderately successful at that until around my 50th year, and the transition that you were alluding to in your introduction occurred with a realization on my part that all of the stuff that I'd been doing, career-wise, all the traditional accoutrements of career activity was not bringing me any significant happiness. And so that is called an awakening. And that is all an awakening is that point where you, and it can happen at any time throughout your life, the younger, the better. For me, it was about 50-ish, and I had that realization that, just doing the same thing is monotonous, and yeah, I'm making money at it, but I'm not happy. I'm not getting happier. And so after an awakening, all that does is give us the awareness to begin looking around and investigating what else is out there. And we learn by analogy, we learn by comparison and contrast. And so that's what we're doing all of this time that we're experiencing things that we don't like, is or that's not bringing us greater happiness, is we're experimenting. We're experimenting with different aspects of life in the hopes that we're going to be able to narrow down our activities and our interest and our perception of self, to be successful in getting more of what we like. So I began looking around, and it led me to meditation. I began meditating. And as most people, and I've taught meditation now for over 20 years. And as I tell my students, almost everybody comes to meditation running away from the stick. In other words, things in their life hurt, and so they want relief from that pain. And my experience was exactly the same. I meditated probably for a couple of years, running away from the stick. And then one day, just out of the blue, I got a bite of the apple. And so the apple tasted really good. And so my motivation transformed from running away from the stick to wanting more of the apple, or chasing the apple. And that is an immutable experience for everyone if they are diligent with that meditation practice. And so that began really a significant intensification of my meditation endeavors, which led to some significant awarenesses. I began talking to my higher self, began teaching meditation, and mindfulness is a natural result of the meditation. Mindfulness is nothing more than learning to keep the perspective that you gain in meditation with you when you go back into the world. And so I describe that to my meditation students as we simultaneously exist in both the metaphysical world and the physical world. The physical world I simply refer to as the village, and the meditation self is our guru's cave. And so in that meditation, we learn to retreat to the guru's cave, and there are no problems in the guru's cave. All problems exist in the village. So as we developed our capabilities of staying in the guru cave for longer periods of time, and eventually constantly, but still going back into the village, then that's developing and learning our practice of mindfulness.
I had a question. So at this time, when you turn 50 and you start exploring meditation, so a couple of things. Did you have a family, a relationship, or anything like that? And how was that impacted, or what was their reaction to this awakening? And then two, um, why was the choice on meditation? Like some people, let's say, may take up bike riding, or which could be a form of meditation if you're on a long bike ride. But I'm just kind of curious what about meditation was attractive in that
Well,
it.
I did the bike riding and the exercise and the gym and all of that stuff. I was athletic in high school and through college, and
Mhm.
I maintained pretty much of an athletic routine throughout my life. And so, that was, it certainly felt better after exercising, but that wasn't significantly providing me with what I was looking for as far as greater happiness.
Do you think it's
Uh,
like a sometimes like, with the movement and everything, like you're on the merry-go-round and you have that awakening and you're like you're you want to slow stuff down, and maybe the act of sitting still or attempting to sit still and manipulate your thoughts to a lower level
Well,
was a
uh,
conscious decision.
yes, but and understand that everything that we experience, no matter
Hmm.
what we're doing, comes to us in thought. There's nothing that we can experience that does not come to us in thought. Thoughts come to us like a metronome. In other words, we perceive that thoughts are coming fast and furious, or they've slowed down, but the actual fact is that they are coming to us on a consistent rate. What changes is our capacity to grapple with the thoughts that are coming in. So when we are in a situation where we perceive things to be fast and furious and the thoughts coming, helter skelter, that is because we are in a more chaotic state. And our perception of those thoughts and the rapidity of their coming in is disturbing to us because it puts us, we are in chaos. And so we perceive the thoughts to be additional chaos. They're adding to our chaos. But that's all of our perception, and that's part of what we learn by becoming mindfulness is learning that moderation of our and inner awareness of ourselves so that we can make the adjustments that we need to with our experiences and our encounters from within. And that's the only thing we can change. The only thing we can change is ourselves. And as we change ourselves, and we change the nature of our experiences.
Um, and did you have family, and what was their reaction, or what was that kind of like, or how
Well,
did the outside world react to you having an awakening, I guess is the better question.
well, I had a family. Part of the unhappiness was unhappiness with spousal relationships at the time. So there was difficulties before this awakening, this realization on my part. And so we parted, have still have two children. And so the nature of our relationship changed, but uh, our relationship was also a lesson for them as well. And so part of the learning for me was learning how to guide and educate them on what they were experiencing and the transformation that was occurring in their lives so that it would be a productive experience for them as well as for me.
Do you find that when you started with the awakening, because I get this picture, this idea, because I worked in a corporate environment as well, of Groundhog Day,
Mm-hmm.
and all of
Sure.
a sudden you're more aware, and because you're consciously like, hey, I'm not happy and I want to change something. How did that impact your parenting, and did you gain more joy from it? Because I'm certain what you were trying to teach them and how you were trying to teach them, because you were now attuned to something different, became different as well. But how was that?
Well, initially it was difficult because I was not competent or comfortable with the changes that were taking place in me. But as I made those changes and had greater awareness, then the guidance that I could give them was more um, fruitful for them gaining a better perspective of their self and their ability to be aware of their surroundings as well as the same things that I was describing about myself. It served as a foundation for them to develop their own perspectives of self.
Yeah, because it's kind of one of those things of I always, I think like after my experience and kind of having to pivot and try something new, create your own way, if you will, part of the experience of now is ensuring that hopefully my daughter doesn't have the same mindset, experience, wherewithal of having to go through what I did, kind of,
Hmm.
whether it's in a corporate environment or not, you know.
Well,
Um,
as much as we would like to save them from that experience, that is an experience that they're going to have on their own
yeah,
and come to their own awarenesses. But what we can provide them with is the resources that when they have these thoughts or challenges of whatever of what their priorities are, that they will have better direction on where to go and where to get answers to change themselves.
yeah. Now, when you had this awakening, did you keep doing what you were doing as an occupation?
No, ironically, in the commercial real estate business, when you finish your project, you're unemployed, and so you have to go start another project to essentially create your job again. And so that's, a 2 or 3 year cycle. And it was pretty much at just a transition point, and so I didn't start that up. I still did some um, minor investment of things to generate some income, but the income and sources of revenue to support myself and family came from totally unexpected sources, and that's one thing that it is very difficult for people to understand and grapple with, that it is our income and our ability to support ourselves and family does not come from the sweat of our brow. It comes from the grace of our higher self as we fulfill our purpose in life. And so the more aware we are of what we're actually supposed to be doing here and implement those steps in order to fulfill that purpose, then the things that we need are provided to us.
Yeah, and kind of what it makes me think of is that, mine was due to a layoff, but I call it a blessing in disguise.
Hmm.
And had it not happened, would I have ever left? I don't know. So therefore, would I have stayed unhappy? But with that, I think of, you know, typically it's this work kind of corporate like environment that really lends itself to that tipping point of somebody waking up someday and they're like, I'm not happy. I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over,
Right.
or I've made it to the top and that's it. And I've interviewed other people who've, made it to the C-suite very fast and were like, no, I thought this was it, but this ain't it.
Still not happy.
Right. And
Right.
so it's interesting. It made me kind of think of, do people who don't pursue those kinds of occupations and whatnot outside of the corporate world, do they have these same kinds of experiences in a non-corporate setting, or what is it about the corporate setting that just lends itself so well to one day people waking up and going, man, this sucks, or maybe you go off into a job and you start off with purpose, but then at some point I think you always realize that you're really serving somebody else's purpose and never your own purpose.
Right. You're
And
fulfilling someone else's dream instead of
yeah,
your dream.
yeah. And whether it's the higher you go, the closer you get to it, the longer you do it. I mean, yeah, accolades, recognition, and all that's good, but does that necessarily equal fulfillment or sense of purpose for, somebody, let's say, who completes a good project or a big
Right.
project that's kind of
Right. Well, that's
worthwhile?
a transient gratification. It's an immediate gratification to get that award and the pat on the back, and then the next day, okay, back to work, let's do it again. And so
Yeah.
it's not an enduring condition that you can sustain. And that enduring condition is what we're all searching for, which requires the transformation of ourselves.
So as you've as you've kind of progressed into meditation, you have the awakening, and what are some of, let's say, like the levels you reach, and what questions does it cause you to start asking yourself? Because like I have some questions from, our Podmatch profile of like, are we alone in the universe and whatnot? What happens when we die? Um, I'm guessing if those are like questions you're ready to answer, these are some of the questions you began to ask yourself when you started sitting still, looking inside.
Mm-hmm.
And what
Yeah.
what kind of what did you come up with? I mean, do you think we're alone in the universe?
Oh no. Oh no. The universe is a very busy place, and there's an infinity of universes. And so um, we are consciousness. Everything that we experience is consciousness. Consciousness defined is our creatorness intoxicated with free will, which requires some unpacking for most folks. We are very low on our consciousness is scaled. Uh, the evolution that we so often like to refer to as scientists has nothing to do with physical evolution. It has to do with our consciousness evolution. The consciousness evolution is synonymous with enlightenment. So we are all enlightened to the degree that we have allowed ourselves to become enlightened. But advancing along the evolution or conscious or enlightenment path requires awareness and focus and direction to proceed significantly along that path. And that's what we've been discussing up to this point in our conversation. Some very significant changes are taking place. So when I say that we're low on the in consciousness scale, we are not only low, but the Earth population has had significant difficulty in advancing along the scale for a variety of reasons, not all of which are inherent to the population itself. In other words, we've been toyed with by those uh, beings that did not want us to advance. One of the strategic things, we exist within a range of consciousness on Earth. Within that range, there are certain criteria that we must fulfill in order to advance on to higher levels. But the range of consciousness that we do exist in is a spectrum. So there is very low consciousness and, relatively speaking, very high consciousness within this range of consciousness. Um, Assuming responsibility for our progression is one of the most strategic things, which is why awakening is important. One of the other significant strategic things is a choice, and it's simply called the choice, whether we are going to polarize service to self or service to others. And the service to others path will eventually reunite us with the one infinite creator. Those choosing the service to self path are choosing what's referred to as an indirect path, and that they will evolve for possibly billions of years along the separation path until they hit literally a brick wall and are compelled to come back within their journey to um, essentially re-enter the process where they dropped out of school.
Mm-hmm.
So that kid that you went to high school with that was too cool for school, well, these folks are too cool for school. And so they have to learn the lessons that were available to them along the service to others path. But in the meantime, those choosing service to self, and particularly having advanced beyond our limited range of consciousness, are very detrimental to our and other third density experiences throughout creation. And they are kind of like, I don't know, the pan of history reference. They're playful, but not playful. They, in the earth experience, is most evident by those individuals that choose to try to dominate and subjugate others. And domination and subjugation is essential for them to maintain their posture as service to self individuals. That is one of the most strategic things that we have to choose, and we are being given the opportunity right now as we speak to, because of increased intensification of our experiences, to make that decision, to make that choice. We are tasked with learning awareness. Awareness is necessary for that step that we were talking about, the awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, we become aware, but we are also tasked with going beyond that and actually becoming awareness. And so becoming awareness is like learning the lessons of third grade so that you can graduate to fourth grade. And you, in order to do fourth grade work, you have to learn the lessons of third grade, or you won't be able to do the work of fourth grade. So we are learning the lessons of third grade right now. And a lot of us are not doing well. And a lot of us are choosing that indirect path. And we're seeing that politically, we're seeing that in our religions, we're seeing that in every aspect of our human experience on earth right now, is that bifurcation, that decision making that is so difficult to make, because in order to choose the service to others path, we have to amend that perception of self and surrender our ego. And so that's a significant reason of why we see such turmoil in almost all countries around the world.
Wow. It's like yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that like in the division, but when you, in order to ascend it, is it individual or is it like humanity kind of as a whole? Like everybody has to kind of decide to serve others as opposed to self-serve.
Now, this range of consciousness begins as an autonomous perceiving individual, and it ends as an autonomous perceiving individual. The next range of consciousness begins as where we left off. It begins as an autonomous perceiving individual, but it will end as what's called a social memory complex, or a group graduation. So right now, as I say, we're in the elementary stages of our evolution. And so consequently, it's all on the individual. Of course, as the individuals make progress, then cumulatively they become a group. And so there is a group consciousness that develops because of the immutability of the experiences that each individual experience as they progress along the enlightenment scale.
So if, and kind of circling back, if not being alone in the universe and it kind of goes off, what's around us? Is there like other systems of consciousness, or what we would call quote unquote people, but I call it like a system of consciousness somewhere else going on?
Yeah, everywhere else. Everything that we see, everything that we feel, everything that we touch, taste, smell is consciousness. And that is true. We perceive there to be space. In other words, a vacuum between what we perceive to be objects. There is no space. That's all consciousness. What the scientists like to refer to as dark matter and dark energy
Mm-hmm.
is consciousness. It is full. It is complete. It is not. There's not absence of of anything anywhere. And it's just our lack of capacity to perceive that because of our low level of consciousness, our low awareness.
So like given this understanding, um, who
Yo, this is Hunter from the Everything's Connected podcast. You clearly have great taste in podcasts because you're listening to this awesome show. Did you know I am also part of the Podcast Connection Network? That's right. There's a whole network of shows dedicated to mental health and holistic well-being, just like this one. We've got something for every mood and every goal. So if you're looking to expand your horizons and explore some incredible content, check us out. The link to the Podcast Connection Network is waiting for you in the description below. Enjoy the rest of the show.
what created Earth, or is there a God? Kind of, what's your take on that? Kind of the beginning.
All is one, and that's called the law of one,
Mhm.
which means that everything is the one infinite creator. The and just kind of broadening that question a little bit,
Mhm.
the common element of every major religion that I'm familiar with is the same, and that is the perception that there is a God and then there is a you or an I.
Right.
And that is not the case. Um, there is the one infinite creator. We are the one infinite creator experiencing ourselves at this range of consciousness. And as we progress, then the um, range of consciousness that we enjoy will change as well. But our experiences are the creator's experience. The creator experiences everything that we experience. It's just our limited capacity to become aware of that. As we evolve, as I started off this conversation, the consciousness is our creatorness intoxicated with free will. The free will is a misunderstood concept of philosophy. They've debated for centuries whether we have free will or we don't have free will or predetermined or whatever, which is all the product of free will. Free will is the perception of separation. And so, because we have a very dynamic perception of separation at this range of consciousness, we are very low on the consciousness scale. As we evolve, what we are actually doing is surrendering our perception of separation. We're surrendering our free will intoxication, because free will works like an intoxicant. When you drink too much whiskey, then that lowers your awareness and you do stupid things that you wouldn't normally do if you hadn't had the whiskey.
Right.
Free will is the same, has this essentially the same effect. The more intoxicated with free will we are, the more stupid things that we do that identify our uniqueness of exploration of ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah. So did you grow up with any religion, or how was that?
Well, why do you presuppose that I've grown up? I mean, that in those.
That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, I still feel, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm 7, 8, sometimes 12.
Yeah, and that's still a good feeling that you can do that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
did you
grew
have
up
a
with a Protestant Catholic Protestant back and
uh,
forth history, and so I've been indoctrinated and went through all the dogma and dispelled the dogma, and um, that obviously didn't fulfill, it didn't make me happier,
right.
and so dispelling all of those uh, beliefs and dogmatic beliefs was part of the process of liberating myself and becoming aware.
Yeah. And well, I mean, where so I mean, you have kind of like a context of religion there. You're kind of indoctrinated, you're taught what you should believe. And then, you know, the world kind of chews you up and spits you out, and you realize, man, I'm not happy. Something's off. Something's amiss.
Mhm.
And you get into meditation and you start understanding some of this. Where did some of the concepts first come from? Like, um, was it through through meditation and understanding this? Was there some reading of yoga books? Did you have any mentors or teachers that kind of teach about some of this? I guess you would say like a consciousness and, you know, whether we're evolving or not, being low conscious beings. Um, where did
Well,
where was that introduced?
and it was introduced, a group of three people in Louisville, Kentucky, in
Mhm.
the early 1980s, channeled an entity called Ra. And this was the same Ra that was identified as a god figure in ancient Europe, Egypt.
Mhm.
And they channeled another four, really five books, and it was a question and answer uh, type of exchange over a few years, and that provided a foundation for understanding for me. And as they were going through that, there were uh, this group had been curious for a long period of time, but really hadn't had the answers that they were seeking, and their communication with Ra were excellent inquiries and responses, but they were limited by their lack of organization of information.
Mhm.
And so you can tell as you read through the books that Don, the Inquisitor, was learning as he was going. And he was a physicist, so had some significant science training, but he was learning the questions to ask. So there's not continuity of, they talk about this topic for a while and satisfy that topic. It was kind of hit and miss, as their inquiry proceeded over a period of time. And that was foundational for me because it gave me the opportunity to stand on their shoulders and to ask questions from the basis of that information. And so my communications, Raw is one of five inherent characteristics of the creator. Um, every star that we see in the sky around us is home to an inherent character, or not an, it's home to an archetype of the creator. Creation is made possible by distortions, um, because all is one, and so everything is the creator. And if there's not the perception of distortion, there's no deviation from the perceived perception that is the creator. And so five inherent, as creation was developed, five inherent characteristics were made obvious and delineated in the very high levels of consciousness. These five inherent characteristics continue the development and further expansion of creation by creating distortions that also were archetypes. Our universe is comprised of 9-star system. So every time our universe has expanded, it's expanded in groups of 9 stars. Our archetypes that comprise that 9 stars are the 5 inherent characteristics, which are awareness, love, wisdom, unity, and stillness, each of which has a separate name, as Ra does. Our sun is home to law, which is wisdom, in our 9-star system. Um, and all of our experiences are predicated upon these 5 inherent characteristics and 4 distortions. And the distortions that comprise our 9-star system are movement, which is a distortion, our um, um, intensified perception of separation beyond that free will provides, unconsciousness, and of course, free will, which is part of all experiences in creation. So those 9 archetypes comprise our entire universe. Other universes are comprised of other mixes and matches of 32 inherent characteristics and distortions. So 26 distortions plus free will plus 5 inherent characteristics. All the other universes are mixed and matched in order to diversify the creator's experience according to these distortions and inherent characteristics.
So what happens when we die?
Well,
How
we
does the
leave the
energy
body.
change?
The
Mm-hmm.
body, we as you and I talking right now, we are an analog projection of our metaphysical self. Our metaphysical self is our enduring self. It doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
It is formed when we begin this range of consciousness, the third density. And it is a consciousness pattern which we are constantly modifying as we perpetually incarnate into the physical world. The average human has incarnated over 3,000 times, some as many as 8,000 times. And the product of our learning in this intensified environment that we consider Earth is accumulated into our consciousness pattern, and it is actually our consciousness pattern that is evolving and will continue to evolve until reunification with the Creator occurs. When we die, we leave our physical body. Our spirit will almost always be relatively disoriented, so it will float above our body for some period of time until it gains some sense of the transition of its beingness, and then it will proceed or progress back to unification with our metaphysical self, which is our consciousness pattern. A ghost is simply an individual that has some strong attachment to usually a physical location because a variety of reasons. It can be everything from I need to take care of my child, I need to do this, I didn't complete what I needed to complete in my incarnation. And so they remain in limbo between their physical self, which they no longer can access, and their metaphysical self. The plan is that we will progress along a series of steps, and we'll encounter a series of lights, which are way stations that, depending on where we are in our development, will determine how many lights that we need to see to transition. Someone who is higher consciousness may only see 2 or 3 lights. Someone that is very low awareness, low on the consciousness scale, but is still transitioning, may see a dozen lights. It's whatever they need in order to ease their transition, because they're surrendering that this hierophant, this ego that we have created while we're alive, and they're surrendering that to remerge, re-enter existence as their consciousness pattern.
Whenever So after you had the awakening, you decided, you know, you didn't go back into full-time um commercial real estate development and stuff. What once you were like, let's say, awakened, what then became the goal? Like, I know, like, for me, after doing whatever I'm doing, I'm like, well, the goal is to podcast, help people. My old job was helping and serving, and now I'm just helping and serving in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes by telling the stories of others and whatnot. What was your goal once you became awake? Was it to help others enlighten? Was it to continue to gain enlightenment yourself? And then what do you do with it?
Well, it's not mutually exclusive. As you progress, then
Mhm.
you become able to help others more significantly. I've written books. I've written 4 books. My most recent book hits bookshelves in 3 days. on August 30th of this
What's
year.
it called?
It's called The Enigma of Consciousness, a spiritual exploration of humanity's relationship to creation. And it goes into great detail in everything that we've been alluding to here in our brief conversation. But
And what about the other books? What are they called?
well, the beginning book that I recommend for people if they're just awakening and looking where to go is called Enlightenment, Plain and Simple.
Mhm.
For someone looking to heal emotional damage or simply to understand how they can progress themselves, the identity model. And the identity is our hierophant, our false perception of self, our ego. It's all the same thing, just different words. Um, and that explains what suffering, what stress is, and what suffering is, and how we can heal from stress and suffering. And it's important that we learn to do that because when you're seeking greater happiness, happiness automatically appears when you experience less stress. Bliss is nothing more than the absence of stress. And so the better we are able to reduce our stress, the more happiness fills the void that stress occupied in our lives.
So ignorance is bliss. So they're saying ignorant people don't feel stressed.
Well, stress stress is misperceived. Stress is nothing more than the difference between our expectations and how things really are. And so, if we are able to experience things as they really are instead of through our lens of expectations, we would no longer experience stress. And that is our destiny as we evolve through the process.
And I see these happiness and enlightenment, and um what's the difference between those?
Well, happiness is the measure of how we're doing. The
Mhm.
happier you are on a day-to-day basis, that means the less stress you're experiencing and the better, farther along the enlightenment scale you're progressing. Enlightenment is the path. And when we're off the path and wandering around in the weeds is when we experience a lot of chaos and a lot of stress and a lot of suffering. And so we
Very,
need to get
very
back on the
true.
path.
So how do you get more happiness? Is just keep stress low?
Well, yeah, when you heal yourself, when you heal your
Uh-huh.
false perceptions of self, then you heal your expectations that are erroneous contrivances of our false identity.
It's kind of like having low expectations when you go into a situation, and then when it's
No, those are
that
still expectations.
true.
High expectations or low expectations, they're still expectations. We want to learn to experience things as they actually are. There's no experience that comes to us with emotion on it. Every experience is absolutely neutral of emotions. We apply the emotion according to how we are. And so while we are distorted with this false identity, this false perception of self, we're interpreting that experience, that thought, through our lens. But the reality is that experience has no emotion on it.
So you got to keep yourself kind of in a higher vibrational state. So
In a
the
mindfulness
the
state,
the you're applying kind of the good juju to the experience, which is what makes it enjoyable versus stressful. So it's a keep yourself in a state of like how are you doing? Happiness, how you're doing.
keep your awareness inside to learn to become aware of how you are at any
Mhm.
one point in time. And I'm sure you've had the experience, you've thought a thought and you didn't like that thought today. And 6 months later, you've had essentially that same thought and you're okay with it. It was actually a pretty good thought. The only thing that's changed is you.
So constant evolution, constant change.
We're constantly changing. We change with every thought.
So as you embarked on this journey, what's one thing that's happened that you never would have expected, that you, whether it's been an experience, something you've done, a place you've been, someone you've met that you never would have guessed happened if you hadn't kind of succumbed to this awakening and kind of embarked moving forward and evolving in the way that you have?
My epiphany experiences have not been with incarnate beings. I did have one significant experience that just as even to this day is overwhelming. In meditation, I had a visitation from my higher self and my higher self's higher self, and my higher self took one hand and my higher self took the other hand, and they simply visited with me and I have absolutely, it could have been 3 weeks, it could have been 30 seconds. I have no idea how long it lasted, but it was such an overwhelming feeling of joy and love that I was trembling, literally physically shaking during the experience, and it took me a good 30 minutes after the meditation before I could stand. It was that overwhelming. And those types of experiences are available to everyone as they make progress along the journey. It may not be exactly that type of experience, but those peeks behind the window or behind the curtain are made available to us as motivation to continue to do the work.
And this comes from meditation.
Well, think about what you're doing with meditation. When we are promoting and developing this false identity, our awareness is honed outside of us so that I can observe you, how you're reacting to my false identity, my behavior, so that I can modify my identity to trick you into giving me more of what I like. We take that same awareness in meditation and invert it and point it inward and begin to become aware of what it is that we have instilled inside of us and begin to let those go. What happens as we surrender, as we heal the emotional baggage that we've collected, which are all those traumas and all that stuff that we have accumulated and don't want to deal with. When we heal all that and we become aware of the beliefs that we've incorporated it to create this false identity, which is our ego mind, then our authentic self begins to emerge. Our authentic self, and there's no one that is not composed of the same stuff, is composed of awareness, love, wisdom, unity, and stillness. And so what we are doing is learning to allow our authentic self to emerge. Every time in this lifetime that we have felt love, it is not because we have gotten a single thing from the person, place, or thing or experience that we were enjoying at the time. It is because we felt comfortable enough with that person, place, or thing to surrender temporarily our false identity. And we allowed ourselves to experience our authentic self. And so we already are what we seek. The task is for us to surrender all of these false perceptions of self that we've piled on top of our authentic self and prevent us from having those blissful experiences.
So if people want to start meditating, kind of like you, and get deeper into it, where do they start? Is this kind of a typical, like a seated
Yeah, well,
I got a mantra or sit
the
still or
posture, the posture, the seating, the Buddhists prescribe a lotus position, and lotus position hasn't been comfortable for me since I was about 6. And so, that doesn't matter. You want to be alert. It is when you begin your meditation, when you learn to meditate, it will be the most alert time you are throughout the entire day. So it's not a sleepy process. It's an inverted awareness process, an exploratory process. You can follow, there are bukus of guided meditations online. I have and everything from my YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. I have a website. Um, all of these. I have 2 podcasts. I have several guided meditations that some of them are pretty advanced for folks. Some of them are beginning. Just experiment. We learn by trial and error. We learn by comparison and contrast. And so experiment. If it's a guided meditation that you're looking for, and I started with guided meditations, and guided meditations for me fairly quickly became a distraction. And so I wanted more quiet. And so I did, some gong music in the background, and then that became a distraction. And now, silence is fine, but you will learn that as you learn your skill in meditation, you can sit in the middle of Times Square and have a wonderful meditation. You learn to screen out all that sensory input. So begin wherever you need to begin. Finding a good meditation teacher in your local area is probably possible, and I would highly recommend that because they can give you some cues or tips or guidance to get you over the hill faster.
yeah. I feel like it's one of those things of you can kind of like ask like, well, when will I know if it's working? And I feel like the answer is like you'll know when it's working because
It's up to
you
you.
you'll have like a certain awareness about it of, oh, I
When
think
you
I
when you
just
quit running away from the stick, it's really working for you.
yeah.
When you're doing it because, gee, I just can't wait to meditate today.
Yeah. Yeah, for me it's I tried. I've tried in the morning. I've tried it kind of has to be definitely intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Um when my mind's in a way where it can be where it needs to be, I guess you could say. Um,
Consistency helps,
yeah,
because it's like you're training your mind and understand. Well, it's not only really training your mind; it's training your spirit to let go of your mind.
yeah. When I try it too early in the morning, half the time I'm like my nose spray hasn't kicked in and all I can think is like, man, I feel like I have allergies.
Yeah,
I'm like, my nose is stuffy. I'm like, that's all I can think about. And I'm like, so first thing in the morning, terrible for me.
a mantra is very helpful. A mantra is very helpful. Um, when they show meditators in movies, they always show a bunch of monks chanting,
Yeah.
doing a mantra. And that's only because it is really, really, really boring watching a group of monks meditate when they're just meditating. They're not moving for hours. So
I
you
can
don't need a
imagine.
movie camera for that. You can get the same thing with a still.
Yeah. How
But a
and
mantra is very helpful to make you or to help you transition from your everyday state into that meditative state.
so it's kind of
And
like
man,
a try many different things and you will find like a sweet spot of what works for you, whether it's
absolutely.
a
Yeah,
environment, a
it,
position, a mantra, any of that.
yeah, just try it. It's trial and error to see what works for you, and what works today will probably not, you don't need it,
Hmm.
in the future. But if you need it today, then great. Use it. Whatever works in order to get you into that mode, into that meditative state.
All right. Well, is there anything you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, if you want to learn more, I encourage you to. You can get all of my books on Amazon. You can get the Enigma of Consciousness in bookstores starting day after tomorrow, Friday. And this is probably not going to air immediately, so that will be meaningless to most of
You're
your
pretty
listeners.
close. It'll air Saturday.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. But and I go into much more detail and talk about the archetypical mind and forgiveness and just lots of stuff. It's a compendium book that will give lots of folks a lot of guidance as they progress along the path. It may not all be usable by them now, but as they progress, and it will serve, I think it was designed to serve as a good tool for years to come.
And I'll have all that in the show notes.
Okay.
So, well, all right. Well, I appreciate you sharing your time with me today. And
Well, I appreciate your patience and allowing me to ramble as I.
yeah, I look forward to getting this out there, and I'll definitely send you the link and whatnot, and when
Wonderful.
it's gonna come out.
Okay,
But
I appreciate it.
you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the other side.
Wonderful. Thank you,
All
Richard.
right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Asteroid of fear.